Ever cast a line and whew, reel in a fish? Feels pretty harmless, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
multiply that by 700 million anglers globally, and you've got yourself a potential ecological tsunami.
Yeah.
Today, we're going deep on the impact of recreational fishing.
It's amazing how something so simple as just fishing for fun can have huge consequences.
Yeah.
We've got research articles and reports here, kind of like a cheat sheet to understanding what happens when we cast a line.
Yeah, for fun.
Not for food or profit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You might be an angler yourself, or just curious about the hidden impacts.
Right.
Either way, we're going to break down the science and uncover some surprising facts about recreational fishing.
We'll be looking at everything from how targeting those trophy catches can impact fish populations to the unintended consequences of catch and release.
Yeah.
Even the bait we use can have a lasting mark on the environment.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What exactly do we mean by recreational fishing?
Simply put, it's fishing for pleasure or sport.
Okay.
Think angling, spearfishing, even collecting crustaceans and mollusks.
Okay.
It's a diverse world and a global phenomenon with millions of people participating.
Millions?
Yeah.
That's a lot of hooks in the water.
It is a lot.
So when we talk about the ecological impact of recreational fishing, where do we even begin?
Well, the most direct impact is on fish stocks themselves.
Okay.
Now, you might think recreational fishing is small potatoes compared to
right.
industrial-scale commercial fishing.
Yeah.
But the sheer number of participants means it can still contribute to fish depletion.
Okay.
Especially in specific areas.
One of the studies we have actually found that recreational fishing was likely the main culprit behind snapper populations in Shark Bay, Australia, plummeting to a shocking 2 to 10% of their original levels.
Yeah, and that's not an isolated case either.
Oh, wow.
In North America, the amount of red drum caught by recreational anglers actually surpasses the commercial catch.
Wow.
A stark reminder of the potential for impact.
So even though we're not fishing for a living, our collective actions can have a huge effect.
Yeah, they do.
Now, one thing that caught my eye in these articles is the whole issue of trophy fishing.
Yeah.
It seems kind of counterintuitive.
Right.
Wouldn't catching the biggest fish actually make future catches smaller?
You're spot on.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating dynamic at play here.
Okay.
Many fishing methods inherently favor catching larger fish.
Okay.
And while landing a massive fish is a thrill, those big fish, especially the females, are crucial for healthy populations.
Right, because they produce more and often healthier offspring.
Exactly.
So by removing them, we're messing with the delicate balance of the ecosystem.
Exactly. It's like selectively weeding out the strongest plants in your garden.
Oh.
And here's a truly alarming statistic.
Okay.
The IGFA, that's the International Game Fish Association, has a world record list that includes a whopping 858 species.
Wow.
That are considered threatened with extinction.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a trophy catch with a dark side.
858 threatened species on the IGFA list.
Yeah.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
Makes you wonder if those record books are unintentionally contributing to their decline.
It's a complex issue, for sure.
Yeah.
But even setting aside trophy fishing, the simple act of targeting larger fish can have unforeseen consequences for an entire population.
So we're essentially playing Darwinian matchmaker with fish populations.
You could say that.
Okay. Favoring the smaller, sneakier fish.
It's true. Over time, this size selection can lead to a decrease in average fish size.
Okay.
And even a shift towards smaller, faster-growing species becoming dominant.
Interesting.
Yeah, some studies even suggest that we could be driving evolutionary changes by removing the fish most vulnerable to angling.
It's almost like we're inadvertently breeding fish that are harder to catch.
Yeah, you could say that.
But what about catch and release?
Yeah.
Isn't that considered the more responsible, conservation-minded approach?
Catch and release is often presented as a win-win solution.
Yeah.
But the reality is a lot more nuanced.
Okay.
While many fish do survive being caught and released, a significant proportion experience delayed mortality.
Okay.
Due to things like internal injuries or the sheer stress of being caught.
One of the articles we have mentions that even fish that appear fine upon release can succumb to these hidden injuries or the physiological toll of the fight.
Yeah.
It's like they swim away with PTSD.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
They might seem okay at first, but the physical damage from hooks, the exhaustion from fighting, the exposure to air and temperature extremes, it all adds up.
Yeah.
Even seemingly minor things like handling them roughly or keeping them out of the water too long can impact their chances of survival.
So even with the best intentions, catch and release isn't always the harmless solution it's made out to be?
Precisely. And this is where angler education becomes crucial. Understanding proper catch and release techniques and knowing when it's best to keep a fish or release, it can significantly minimize harm.
Speaking of minimizing harm, let's talk about a problem that's not directly related to fishing techniques themselves.
Okay.
Invasive species.
Yeah.
Remember that bucket of minnows you used for bait?
Uh-huh.
Turns out those seemingly harmless creatures can be ecological ninjas wreaking havoc on unsuspecting ecosystems?
Yeah. Invasive species are a major concern, particularly when we introduce non-native species for recreational fishing.
Okay.
The articles we have are full of cautionary tales about the unintended consequences of these introductions.
One that really stood out to me was the introduction of salmonids in places like Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
They were brought in to create sport fisheries,
Right.
but ended up decimating native fish and amphibian populations, even impacting bird populations.
It's a classic case of good intentions gone wrong.
Yeah.
The salmonids, while popular with anglers, completely disrupted the natural balance of these ecosystems.
And then there's the round goby in the Great Lakes.
Right.
Another invasive species that's wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
They outcompete native fish and even introduce toxins into the food chain.
The round goby story is particularly alarming because it highlights how invasive species can affect the very fish that anglers are trying to catch.
And as if that wasn't enough, we have yet another example of a problematic invasive fish. The northern snakehead.
Oh, yeah.
This aggressive predator is a real threat to ecosystems in several U.S. states.
The northern snakehead is a prime example of how a species introduced for recreational purposes can become a major ecological villain.
Right, yeah.
Its presence disrupts food webs and can lead to the decline of native fish populations.
Yeah.
It's a sobering reminder that our actions can have far-reaching and often unintended consequences.
So far, we've focused on the direct impacts of recreational fishing on fish populations themselves, but our research also revealed that the ecological footprint of angling extends far beyond that.
Absolutely. Think about all the activities associated with recreational fishing. Accessing fishing spots, setting up gear, wading in the water.
Right.
It all adds up.
One article specifically mentioned the creation of walking paths and the use of off-road vehicles near shorelines.
Right.
What's a big deal about a little trail or tire tracks?
These activities might seem harmless, but they can damage shoreline vegetation.
Oh, okay.
Which has a ripple effect on fish and other wildlife that depend on that vegetation for food and shelter.
Yeah.
It's like bulldozing a buffet for the local ecosystem.
And even something as seemingly innocuous as wading in the water can be problematic.
Exactly. Wading can crush eggs and larvae, disrupting breeding cycles.
Oh, wow.
And impacting fish populations down the line.
It's amazing how even the most subtle actions can have cascading effects.
It's all interconnected, and we haven't even touched on the pervasive issue of pollution from fishing gear.
Oh, right.
Lost fishing lines, hooks, and other gear, especially if they're made of plastic, become a silent menace.
Okay.
Entangling wildlife, damaging habitats, and even entering the food chain.
Several studies we read actually found plastic from fishing lines in the stomachs of fish.
Yeah.
Which is a serious concern because it can introduce toxins into the ecosystem.
Right, and those toxins can then bioaccumulate as they move up the food chain.
Right.
Potentially even ending up on our dinner plates.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that what we put into the environment ultimately comes back to us.
Okay, so we've outlined some of the major impacts of recreational fishing on the environment.
We have.
But what can be done to manage these impacts and ensure the sustainability of this hugely popular activity?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be exploring in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of recreational fishing.
We've already uncovered some pretty surprising facts about how this seemingly harmless pastime can impact fish populations and the environment.
Now let's shift gears and explore some of the strategies being used to address those challenges and ensure the future of our fisheries. After all, with millions of anglers around the world, finding ways to minimize our collective impact is critical.
Right, because it's not just about reeling in a big one, it's about making sure there are fish to be caught for generations to come. One of the things that really caught my attention in our research was the idea of informal institutions in fisheries management.
Oh, yeah.
Informal institutions in fishing. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's a fascinating concept. Think of it as practices and norms that emerge organically within the angling community itself.
Okay.
rather than being imposed by formal regulation.
So things like voluntary catch and release practices.
Exactly.
Or anglers setting limits on the type of gear they use.
Exactly. And one of the articles we have suggests that these informal institutions can be just as effective as formal regulations.
Right.
Especially in situations where enforcement is difficult.
So it's not just about government agencies setting rules. It's also about anglers taking responsibility for their own actions and influencing each other's behavior.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful concept.
It is, and there's growing evidence that these angler-driven initiatives can have a real impact on conservation efforts.
One of the sources cited an example from Australia, where recreational fishing organizations have developed a standard for assessing the environmental impact of fishing tournaments.
That's right.
Interesting.
It's called Neat Fish.
Okay.
And it's a voluntary program that encourages tournament organizers to think beyond just who catches the biggest fish.
Oh, okay.
They're now being evaluated on things like their impact on fish stocks and the environment.
So instead of just focusing on the competition aspect,
Right.
these tournaments are being held to a higher standard, a more sustainable standard.
Exactly.
That's a fantastic example of how the angling community can take the lead in promoting responsible fishing practices. But it all comes back to angler education, right?
Absolutely. The more anglers understand about the ecological impacts of their actions,
Yeah.
the more likely they are to adopt sustainable practices even when no one is watching.
One of the articles emphasized the importance of educational programs that empower anglers with knowledge about catch and release techniques, habitat conservation, and the risks of invasive species.
And those programs can come in many forms.
Yeah.
Workshops, online resources, even outreach efforts by fishing clubs and organizations.
Right.
It's all about reaching anglers where they are
Okay.
and giving them the tools to make informed decisions.
It seems like even small changes in angler behavior can have a ripple effect, leading to a healthier environment for everyone. But let's be realistic, not every angler is going to voluntarily adopt these responsible practices.
That's true, and that's where formal regulations and enforcement come into play.
Okay, so let's dive into the world of rules and regulations.
Okay.
One of the key tools that governments use to manage recreational fishing is bag limits, right?
Right. Bag limits restrict the number of fish an angler can keep within a given time frame.
Okay.
It's a way to prevent overfishing and ensure there are enough fish left to replenish the population.
Makes sense. But one of our sources pointed out that bag limits alone may not always be the most effective solution.
That's correct. They can be difficult to enforce.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily address issues like habitat disturbance or the use of fishing gear that can harm the environment.
Given the limitations of bag limits, are there any other innovative regulatory approaches being explored?
Well, gear restrictions are often implemented.
Okay.
This could involve prohibiting certain types of hooks or fishing lines that are known to be particularly damaging to fish or the environment.
And of course, we've already talked about the importance of marine protected areas, or MPAs.
MPAs are a vital tool for safeguarding sensitive habitats
Yeah.
and giving fish populations a chance to recover. They can range from no-take zones,
Okay.
where all fishing is prohibited,
Got it.
to areas with specific restrictions on the types of fishing allowed.
Right.
It's all about finding the right balance between protecting the ecosystem and allowing for sustainable fishing practices.
One of the challenges with managing recreational fishing, though, is that it often involves a complex web of regulations at different levels of government.
Exactly.
You've got local, state, and federal agencies, each with their own jurisdictions and priorities.
Exactly. And that can sometimes lead to a fragmented approach,
Right?
making it difficult to implement comprehensive and effective management strategies.
One article described the situation in California where there are hundreds of regulations related to recreational fishing.
Wow.
But they don't always work together in a coordinated way. It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be, and it highlights the need for a more integrated approach to fisheries management.
Okay.
One that takes into account not just the ecological aspects, but also the social and economic aspects of recreational fishing.
It seems like finding the right balance between conservation and angler satisfaction is a delicate dance.
It is. But there are some promising examples out there of communities working together to find solutions that benefit both fish and fishermen. One of the sources discussed the concept of co-management,
Okay.
where anglers are actively involved in the decision-making process.
That sounds like a great way to foster a sense of ownership and responsibility within the angling community.
It allows for local knowledge and perspectives to be incorporated into management plans, which can lead to more effective and sustainable outcomes.
And when anglers feel like they have a voice in the process, they're more likely to comply with regulations and support conservation efforts. It's a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
But let's not forget the economic side of things.
Yeah, you're right. Recreational fishing is a significant economic driver in many coastal communities.
Right.
Generating billions of dollars in revenue through tourism gear sales and other related industries.
One of the articles mentioned that in Australia, recreational fishing actually contributes more to the economy than commercial fishing.
That's a remarkable statistic.
It is.
And it underscores the importance of managing these fisheries sustainably.
Yeah.
To ensure their long-term economic viability.
So it's not just about protecting the environment, it's also about protecting livelihoods and the economic well-being of communities that depend on recreational fishing.
Exactly. It's a complex equation.
Right.
But one thing is clear.
Okay.
If we want to continue to enjoy the benefits of recreational fishing, both economic and ecological, we need to find ways to minimize our impact on the environment.
And that brings us back to the importance of education and outreach, right?
Absolutely. We need to empower anglers with the knowledge and tools to make responsible choices.
Right.
We need to promote best practices for catch and release, habitat conservation, and the prevention of invasive species.
And we need to foster a culture of stewardship within the angling community.
Yes.
Where anglers see themselves not just as consumers of a resource, but as partners in conservation.
That's a great point. It's not just about following rules.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating a deeper understanding of how our actions are interconnected with the health of our aquatic ecosystems.
Right.
And one of the most effective ways to do that is through storytelling.
Storytelling. How does that fit into the picture?
By sharing stories about successful conservation efforts, about the beauty and wonder of the underwater world, and about the personal connections that people have to fishing.
Yeah.
We can inspire others to care and take action.
Okay.
It's about tapping into that emotional connection and reminding people that fishing is more than just a sport.
Yeah.
It's a way of life, a connection to nature, a legacy that we need to protect for future generations.
I love that it's about making it personal and reminding people why they fell in love with fishing in the first place.
Exactly.
Speaking of protecting our legacy, we can't ignore the elephant in the room.
You're talking about climate change, right?
That's the one, it seems like the ultimate challenge, the one that hangs over all our conservation efforts.
Climate change is already having a significant impact on our oceans and freshwater systems.
Yeah.
It's altering water temperatures, disrupting fish migration patterns, and increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. The challenges are real, and they're happening now.
One of the articles we read highlighted the vulnerability of cold water fisheries in the United States to climate change, predicting significant habitat loss in the coming decades.
And it's not just about habitat loss.
Right.
Warming waters can lead to changes in fish behavior, making them more susceptible to disease and less able to reproduce successfully.
Wow.
It's a multifaceted threat that requires a multifaceted response.
It sounds pretty daunting, but what can we do? Are there ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change on recreational fishing?
Absolutely. One crucial step is to reduce our carbon emissions both individually and collectively.
That means supporting policies that promote renewable energy efficiency and sustainable transportation.
Exactly. And it also means making changes in our own lives.
Yeah.
Like reducing our reliance on single-use plastics, choosing sustainable seafood, and supporting organizations that are working to address climate change.
Right.
Every little bit helps.
But it's not just about minimizing the negative impacts. It's also about adapting to the changing conditions.
That's a crucial point. Fisheries management strategies will need to evolve to take into account the effects of climate change on fish populations and their habitats.
So we might need to adjust fishing seasons, implement new catch limits, or even create new protected areas to safeguard vulnerable species.
Precisely. And we need to invest in research to better understand the complex interplay between climate change and recreational fishing.
Okay.
So that we can make informed decisions about how to manage these resources sustainably in a rapidly changing world.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What's the key takeaway from all of this?
I think the takeaway is this. Recreational fishing is a valuable activity.
Yeah.
One that brings joy to millions of people around the world. But it's also an activity that comes with responsibilities.
We need to be mindful of our impact on the environment. We need to support sustainable fishing practices, and we need to work together to address the challenges posed by climate change.
Because in the end, the future of our fisheries is in our hands.
Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey exploring the world of recreational fishing and its impact on the environment.
Yeah, we've seen how this popular pastime can have both positive and negative effects on fish populations ecosystems, and even the economy.
And we've delved into some of the management strategies being used to address those challenges.
Right.
Everything from bag limits to marine protected areas.
Yeah.
But one theme that keeps surfacing is the critical role of angler education.
It's not just about following the rules. It's about empowering anglers with the knowledge and understanding to make responsible choices that benefit both the sport and the environment.
I think that's a key point.
Yeah.
Anglers are ultimately the ones on the front lines.
Right.
They're the ones interacting directly with the fish and the ecosystems.
Exactly. And one of the studies we came across really highlights the power of angler education.
Okay.
It found that even brief educational workshops can significantly improve anglers' catch and release practices,
Wow.
leading to higher survival rates for released fish.
That's encouraging.
It is.
It suggests that even small changes in behavior can have a big impact.
Yeah.
What are some of the key things anglers should be educated about?
Well, for starters, understanding proper catch and release techniques is essential.
Okay.
This includes using the right type of hooks and fishing line,
Mm-hmm.
minimizing the amount of time a fish is out of the water,
Right.
and handling it with care to reduce stress.
So it's about minimizing the trauma for the fish.
Exactly. One of the articles mentioned that using barbless hooks or circle hooks can significantly reduce injury and mortality for released fish.
That's a great example of a simple change that can make a world of difference.
Right. And then there's the importance of reviving a fish before releasing it,
Okay.
especially if it's been fought hard and is exhausted.
Another article we read described a technique of gently moving the fish back and forth in the water
Yeah.
to help it regain its equilibrium and oxygenate its gills.
Those small details can be the difference between a fish swimming away healthy and one that succumbs to the stress of being caught.
But responsible fishing goes beyond just catch and release, right?
Right.
Anglers also need to be mindful of the potential for habitat disturbance.
Absolutely. Education programs should emphasize the importance of minimizing our footprint on the environment.
Okay.
Simple things like sticking to designated trails and avoiding trampling vegetation can have a big impact.
And being mindful of noise levels,
Yeah.
especially during sensitive times like nesting season.
Right.
It's about respecting the entire ecosystem, not just the fish we're after.
Right. And we can't forget about the issue of pollution, particularly from lost or discarded fishing gear.
One of the articles had some great suggestions for anglers,
Yeah.
like participating in fishing line recycling programs or even just carrying a small bag to collect any trash they encounter while fishing.
Those small acts of stewardship can really make a difference.
Yeah, and then there's the critical issue of invasive species.
Right.
We've talked about how devastating those can be to ecosystems.
Yes.
Introducing non-native species can create a real ecological mess.
Angler education plays a crucial role in preventing the spread of invasive species.
Okay.
It's about being aware of which species are native to an area
Right.
and making sure that any bait or live wells are free of unwanted hitchhikers.
And it's also about reporting any sightings of invasive species to the authorities so that action can be taken.
Exactly. Early detection can prevent a small problem from becoming a big one.
Now, the question is,
Yeah.
how do we get these messages out to anglers effectively?
That's the challenge.
There are the traditional methods like brochures and signage at fishing spots,
Yeah.
but those might not reach everyone.
We need to embrace new approaches,
Okay.
like using technology and social media to reach a wider audience.
Okay.
Think online resources, videos, interactive maps, even social media campaigns.
Right.
These can all be effective tools for sharing information and engaging anglers in a way that resonates with them.
One of the sources we read even mentioned using virtual reality to simulate fishing experiences and teach anglers about best practices in a more interactive and engaging way.
That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to practice catch and release techniques in a virtual environment
Right.
before ever hitting the water.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless. And then there's the power of storytelling.
Oh.
That's something we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Sharing those personal stories, the connections people have to fishing, the beauty and fragility of our aquatic ecosystems, the success stories of conservation efforts.
Yeah.
Those can be incredibly impactful and inspiring.
It's about connecting with people on an emotional level, not just bombarding them with facts and figures.
Exactly. People protect what they love, and storytelling can help foster that love and respect for our waterways.
Ultimately, angler education can't be a top-down approach.
Right.
It needs to be a collaborative effort, right?
Exactly. It requires partnerships between government agencies,
Yeah.
conservation organizations, fishing clubs, tackle shops,
Right.
everyone who has a stake in the health of our fisheries.
It's about creating a culture of stewardship within the angling community.
Yes.
Where anglers see themselves as partners in conservation, not just consumers of a resource.
And that shift in mindset is essential for ensuring the long-term sustainability of this amazing pastime.
Well, we've covered a lot of complex issues in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
From the impacts of overfishing and habitat destruction to the challenges of managing invasive species and adapting to climate change, it can feel overwhelming at times.
It's true. There are a lot of challenges facing our fisheries. But one thing that gives me hope is the passion and dedication of the angling community.
Yeah.
Anglers are the eyes and ears on the water.
Right.
They see firsthand the beauty and the challenges facing our aquatic ecosystems.
And by empowering them with knowledge,
Yeah.
tools, and a sense of responsibility, we can turn that passion into a powerful force for conservation.
Exactly. Whether you're an avid angler or just someone who appreciates the importance of healthy oceans and rivers, we all have a role to play in protecting these precious resources.
So let's all do our part to learn to share our knowledge and to work together to ensure that future generations can experience the joy and wonder of fishing.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of recreational fishing. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and perhaps even a renewed appreciation for the importance of sustainable fishing practices.
Until next time, tight lines, everyone.